Rod Stewart's son, Aiden, 11, rushed to hospital amid heart attack fears after going blue during football match. I saw this going around, and you know what the first thing I thought was? 11-year-olds don't have heart attacks. Why would you think 11-year-olds are having a heart attack? Why would you think that your kid who's turning blue is having a heart attack? I've seen kids turn pale and blue before. Things have happened. Don't know exactly what it is. But why would they be like, he's having a heart attack and he's 11? Okay, for sure. It's possible that 11-year-olds can have heart attacks. It's just it's not like the go-to most common thing. Of course, upon seeing the story, many people have this reaction related to the documentary Died Suddenly, associations with cardiac arrest and some strange phenomena happening in the media when you look up the phrase died suddenly. I can't tell you what it means. I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you this. It is kind of strange that people are, this is the headline. What they said was this kid actually had a panic attack and then stopped breathing. I mean, that sounds weird too, to be completely honest, but that's what they said. So why is it not the headline of this story? Well, there's a couple reasons why I decided to do this segment, and one was because of the response I got from leftists, and it gives me this feeling of despair and rage. And the rage is based upon the fact that we so desperately want to be understood. We don't want a bunch of dumb people believing the wrong thing. We're trying to adequately express an idea. But unfortunately, there are some people who just cannot comprehend. So it's a frustration, a rage born out of frustration that there are individuals who legitimately lack the comprehensive ability to understand sarcasm and humor, and thus a large component of the culture war is rooted in people being unable to understand jokes, or they read something that isn't there, things like that. I had a friend who's a lefty. I remember she messaged me once and she was just like, hey, you got to stop posting these things on Twitter. And I was like, what, why? And she was like, because people believe them. And I'm like, what? Okay, let me show you this tweet. I quoted the Metro article. I screen grabbed it. Sir Rod Stewart's son, Aiden, 11, rushed to hospital amid heart attack fears after going blue during football match. I said, 11-year-olds have heart attacks all the time. Calm down. I didn't say anything about anything else. Matt Binder responds with, please read the article before you share it. Why? Did I say, oh, heavens me, Rod Stewart's son had a heart attack. How could this be? I said sarcastically, they have heart attacks all the time. As if to insinuate, they don't. I linked to the article so you can read it. This is the problem with the left. They can't understand things. They just can't. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people on the right who also lack the comprehensive ability to understand things. But this is a problem. Let me read you the story first because it's very, very short and you can understand. Sir Rod Stewart has recalled the terrifying moment he thought his young son was having a heart attack. I want to pause and just say, for what reason would someone assume their 11-year-old was having a heart attack? The pop crooner, 77, rushed his son Aiden to hospital recently after he collapsed during a football match. Aiden is Sir Rod's youngest child with wife Penny Lancaster, and the couple also share a son, Alistair, 16. The concerning incident happened when Aiden was playing a match for his under-12s team, Young Hoops. However, it's not known exactly when it happened. We thought my boy had a heart attack. Speaking to 442 magazine, the singer continued. He was going blue and was unconscious until he calmed down. It was scary, but it turned out to be a panic attack. The lad wanted to do well, pulled on the hoops. It was pulled on the hoops in Scotland for his dad. Is that it? Another boy fell backwards and banged his head. He's still not back. There are 2 ambulances, blah, blah, blah. That's it. That's the story. Of course, it's sensational. So the media is going to run with heart attack fears, despite the fact, knowing that they were like, oh, he had a panic attack. Okay, here's my point. 2 things. For what reason would Rod Stewart assume his 11-year-old had a heart attack when he collapsed? I've been to parties when I was younger, and there have been kids whose lips turned blue and were passing out, and nobody said, he's having a heart attack. Because that doesn't appear, at least in my understanding, or at least my experience. I'm not a doctor, by the way, so I don't know. Doesn't appear to be a symptom of a heart attack. Typically, they say like you get a tingling feeling, you get burning sensation in your chest. Some people mistake it for like acid reflux or something like that. A kid collapsing and turning blue, They thought that was a heart attack. A myocardial infarction, I don't believe, presents itself that way. Perhaps they just were speaking colloquially, not understanding. Maybe they meant cardiac arrest. Could there be something happening that would lead Rod Stewart to believe this? If you listen to any of the Timcast IRL stuff, you would have heard me say, I do not believe the died suddenly vax stuff. Died Suddenly is a documentary. You may have seen it. It's very, very interesting. I don't believe all of these embalmers who appear in the documentary finding strange blood clots are conspiring with each other. In the documentary, several doctors come out and, embalmers, and they're like, I've never seen anything like this. They're pulling long, white, fibrous clots from bodies. They say it's a new phenomena they've begun starting to see recently. I don't know why that's happening. In the documentary, the individual got one of the main guys. He goes, and then you find out they're vaccinated. And I'm like, yeah, I get it, but I feel like that's jumping the gun. Of course, the response I've received from many people is, what other major medical event happened recently that could result in such a thing? And my only response is COVID. I don't know. If I was going to make a bet, I would say the two largest probabilities of why we're seeing these clots and why embalmers are shocked by it is likely COVID or maybe vaccines. But I'm not going to sit here and pretend that you can just definitively look at this stuff and then know for sure. We've also seen a spattering of died suddenlies. Yes, this is funny. So I was pulling up the documentary Died Suddenly to find some source material. And of course, on Google, what I end up getting is a whole bunch of stories about people dying suddenly. Like, here you go, 1 day ago. This is weird. 42-year-old woman died suddenly. Here's another one. Army confirms death of young soldier who died suddenly. Okay, let me tell you something. India Times says heart attack trends on Twitter as terrifying videos of young people collapsing goes viral. Interesting. Now, I don't know what this website is. IndiaTimes.com. It appears on Google. They say after the deaths of celebrities like KK and Raju Srivastava, it has become certain that young people can lose their lives to heart attack too, and it's alarming. In the past year, cases of heart attacks and cardiac arrest among young people rose drastically. Most recently, at a wedding in Uttar Pradesh, the bride collapsed minutes after exchanging garlands on stage at her wedding due to a case of cardiac arrest and died. Is it possible that Rod Stewart is familiar with these trends? And so that's why he made the assumption about his kid, when in fact his kid was actually just having a panic attack? That's why I said 11-year-olds have heart attacks all the time. Calm down. Because they don't. This is the funny thing. Like, what Matt's been on the show. What did you think? Like, he looked at what I said and made an immediate assumption about the meaning of my tweet, despite the fact me not giving any meaning at all. So I suppose one reading is I'm saying the kid did have a heart attack and it's unusual. I didn't say that. And there's a reason why my tweet is rather vague and nebulous and snarky sarcastic. Because I don't know. So I'll stress this point again. If you guys watch the Timcast members only stuff, you're probably saying either, Tim, I know you say this, or Tim, you're wrong about this. You've seen me say it and argue with Luke. In fact, just last night, Ron DeSantis said he's going to be taking action against Pfizer and Moderna, I think. A study came out that said that there is a net harm for certain young people with boosters or something like that. Again, I'm not a doctor. I don't have all the answers. Don't talk to me about your health, which is why when I see a story that I think is interesting and should be highlighted, I often tweet something like LOL, ha, or 11-year-olds have heart attacks all the time. Calm down. Okay. So you guys get it. You understand my point. There's a frustration that I feel because I want Matt to understand. I don't want him to get the wrong impression and think wrong things. Unfortunately, he can't. And that's the frustrating thing. There's no way to explain to this guy or any of his followers. So when he said, Tim, please read the article before you share it, why? What does that have to do with the fact that I made a vague and nebulous joke sarcastically? I linked the article, I shared the image, and yes, in fact, I did read it. My point was 11-year-olds don't have heart attacks all the time. That's it. That's it. I responded with, Matt, do 11-year-olds have heart attacks all the time? Because the answer is no. I'm trying to guide him to understand the purpose of sarcasm. It doesn't happen. Why would you see a kid fall down and assume this? It could be two things. Rod Stewart has died suddenly, or he's read a bunch of stories about young people having cardiac arrest. There have been a few recently. And so he immediately jumps the gun and assumes when his kid is turning blue, it must be that his heart is failing. I guess. In response to this, all of these other leftists were like, Tim, oh my God, he didn't have a heart attack. And I'm like, I know. Why don't you get it? Why can't you get it? You know, I said, holy ish, I have to explain to leftists that 11-year-olds don't have heart attacks. The lack of comprehension explains a lot about the left these days. Why am I frustrated? Because I wish that it wasn't this way. But it is. You put out a tweet, and then you get frustrated that these people don't understand what you were saying. There's a bit of regret. I'm like, I don't want Matt Bender to think the wrong thing. I want him to think right things. I want him to be led to the correct conclusion. I don't want him to make false claims about what I believe. I want accuracy. But they can't get it. He genuinely thought I was saying they do have heart attacks and that he had a heart attack. Here's the other thing. Matt Bender clearly doesn't watch any of my shows because if he did, he'd hear me criticize the film Died Suddenly for saying they have no hard evidence the vaccines were causing these things. Because he doesn't, he assumes what I'm saying means the vaccines are causing these things or something to that effect, which I'm not. And I've actually rejected. I'll give you my my thoughts on all this. There's a really good point made in this article from sciencebasedmedicine.org. I don't actually like their approach to it because this reads like, just general garbage. They're like, the Died Suddenly film is blah, blah, blah. And, they're pulling clots and clots are normal. And it's like, okay, look, man, you're not going to convince me that a bunch of embalmers got together and conspired. But one thing he does point out is the theatrics, not an embalming table. There's a scene where the camera is shot low with a foggy filter, and the guy's walking up in slow motion to the body that's laying on the table. This guy mentions that there's at least two different bodies, not the same person. And I wonder if this person's even dead. And that's not an embalming table. Embalming table have trenches to filter away fluids. That's the point. He goes on to say in this article that embalmers love clot stories because it means they got the fluid through. That's not an answer to Died Suddenly. If a bunch of embalmers are like, we're seeing this thing we've never seen before, I say, oh, that's interesting. I wonder what's causing it. They can then come out and say, the vaccines are causing it. And I'm going to be like, come on, guy. You're going to have to do a lot of work to get to that point. There have been some interesting studies. I am not someone who jumps to conclusions. Sorry, I'm never going to be. Or at least, I'm not going to say never. I don't want to speak absolutely. The point is, you are allowed to believe what you want. I'm not here to tell you what to believe, okay? I'm here to say that I am not going to make assertions because, look, I don't want to be wrong. That's why I put out tweets that are relatively vague when I'm highlighting a story that I think you should read. Maybe Matt doesn't actually read articles or understand any of this stuff. It's funny. He's like, maybe you should read the article, Tim. I was like, literally saying 11-year-olds don't have heart attacks. Someone responded, are you implying Rod Stewart should have known it wasn't a heart attack when his kid collapsed? Yes! What? You're saying that you think the reasonable approach right now is that when an 11-year-old kid turns blue, you're like, he must be having a heart attack. For what reason do you think that? Is it because of things like this that a leftist would assume a kid's having a heart attack? Wouldn't a right-wing person do that? Ugh, heavens me. I think COVID is a strong culprit for what's causing the clots. Some people have said, yeah, Tim, but we didn't see these clots until after the vaccine program started. It could just be that the clotting takes a year or longer to develop. I know people who are not vaccinated who got serious clots. I don't want to say who they are because it's their private business. But yes, we know people not vaccinated got clots. They say that a side effect of clotting, a side effect of COVID could be clotting. Could it be that, let's go conspiratorial. People are saying it could be the vaccines. And I'm like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know. Maybe not. There's no direct evidence other than speculation. How about this one for you, conspiracy theorists? COVID was gain-of-function research made in the Wuhan lab that accidentally leaked. It was a bioweapon of sorts. And COVID, being a lab-leaked bioweapon, is causing death clots. Isn't that also entirely possible? Look, if you're going to come out and you're going to make these hypotheses, give it these theories, COVID was a lab-leaked bioweapon. Okay, then it isn't possible that it has a deadly effect on a population. Well, people want to argue that it is a lab leak, but that it's actually not that bad. I'm like, okay. Well, for a lot of people, we've seen that it's not as bad as, say, like an airborne Ebola. But isn't it possible that COVID has these side effects? There are a lot of people that argue long COVID is secretly vaccine injury. Maybe, I don't know. I also know people who have had chronic illness who are not vaccinated. I think people want to believe things. Like Matt Binder, we've had him on the show. He doesn't want to understand me at all. He wants to assume the most negative approach to a story. The left generally does that. You're the other, therefore you're wrong no matter what you say, no matter what you do. There will be no honest attempt at interpreting what you're saying. In fact, the honest approach would have just been like, Matt could have responded with, did you read the article and see that the kid didn't have a heart attack? I would have responded with, like, yes, the point was 11-year-olds don't have heart attacks. That's the joke. Calm down. 11-year-olds have heart attacks all the time. They literally don't. It would be extremely rare and alarming if that were the thing to have happened. And there's probably more reasonable explanations as to why this was happening. I also think it's fair to point out that on the minds of everybody, and, perhaps fair point to Matt, a lot of people are assuming these died suddenly events are directly tied to vaccines or something like that. But Matt didn't even bring up vaccines or anything like that. So it's like, what's the point you're trying to make other than you just generally do not understand what's being said? This is where we are, my friends. This is what frustrates me. You've got things like the 2020 narrative. Mike Cernovich has been talking about ballot harvesting forever. And there were people who legitimately believed Donald Trump would be reinstated for some reason. They believed this March 3rd or something like that. And I'm like, why? I said this with the election in Arizona. It is extremely likely, in all likelihood, despite the fact there are legal challenges, that that Hobbs will be the governor. You might not like it. And there's a lot of things about what happened. Tabulators failing, all that stuff. But that's where we're at. The raw exercise of power. I don't like jumping to conclusions. There are a lot of people who want to blame the vaccines. And I'm like, that's just, I'm sorry. I just don't. You can blame COVID equally, the same. But people want to believe it, I think, because the government mandated vaccines. They want to believe that the mandates were wrong and those who fell for it or who abided by it are now suffering the consequences. It may be the case. I'm not going to pretend I have all the answers. That's kind of the point I'm making here is I don't know. It could be that many elderly people who were pressured into getting the vaccine were actually saved. I'm not going to believe that, to be completely honest, that like there were good intentions at play here, because Cuomo and many other Democrat governors just straight up put sick people into nursing homes, killing the elderly. I don't think they were trying to save anybody. But I can't assert things without evidence. What we know, Cuomo did put COVID patients in nursing homes for some reason, and then elderly people died from COVID. You can also argue that they died with COVID, not from COVID, and then who knows? But a lot of people did die. I got COVID. It sucked. Hey, it was a big catalyst for me losing a lot of weight, though, so that worked out for me, I suppose. Dropped 30 pounds. How about that? I didn't care before this. I was just like, whatever. It's like I skated. I just ate what I felt like, and I weighed what I weighed. And then afterwards, I just had like a change. After getting sick, I was like, I'm just not going to eat sugar, and then lost a lot of weight. I wish that there was an honest attempt at real communication. I appreciate Matt Binder coming on the show and having the conversation we did. But it did seem like even on the show, he could not understand things. Like after the show ended, we continued to talk for like an hour. And he was exhausted. He was like, how are you still talking? And I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't sleep. I don't know, man. Maybe it's because I stopped eating sugar and I'm getting all this protein and fat energy. Oof. Doing things right. Exercise. But it was like no matter what I said, he just genuinely couldn't comprehend. So I have an idea based on all of this. The first thing is I want to stress, I am not your run-of-the-mill tribalist. I will not come out and blame vaccines without evidence of anything. I will not come out and blame COVID without evidence of anything. I will insist that people talk to medical professionals they trust who can answer their questions and not get advice from me. If you want to believe in election conspiracy theories, you're allowed to do it. And very well, I may be wrong. But I'm not going to believe things unless someone comes and presents the evidence to me, hard evidence. I have seen things that lead me to conclude that when it comes to things like the election, ballot harvesting is how they were able to pull it off. changing the rules. In fact, in that Time magazine article about fortification, the shadow campaign, they outright explain how they changed the laws and expanded mail-in voting to win. So when people are like, how could it be possible? If you don't think it's possible that Democrats collected 80 million plus votes for Biden, you will lose again, like you did in Georgia and like you almost did in the midterms this time around, or I should say partially lost. It's because you can't understand, you can't fathom that they have found ways to get the votes. Knocking on doors, filling them out. Ballot harvesting is the key. Sure, I mean, there's probably fraud across the board, but they don't need it. So that's my point. You're not going to get a partisan tribal narrative from me. But I genuinely just wished, believe, hoped that there was a possibility that we could communicate. But if we can't, Milo Yiannopoulos said this to Ian, and it was masterfully stated. I'm sorry, not to Ian, to a super chatter. He said, when there is a gap in intellect this far, it is just impossible to explain or communicate. I got an idea. Universal basic income. Hold on, hear me out. You guys are going to agree with me. And I'm going to let you stew for a minute so that you're sitting there going, what? Hold on. I would like to propose universal basic income. Let's say $1,000, $1,500 per month to anyone who so chooses to receive it. And upon accepting even a single check, you are ineligible to vote. Plain and simple. Hey, look, man, you don't care about these things, right? How would you like to just get guaranteed income to live your life? Here's your money. And now, upon accepting this money, you are not eligible to vote. It's a choice, not by force. If you want to vote, well, you got to support yourself. If you want us to pay for it, then you can't be voting. That's simple. Sound good? I think it's a potential idea to solve a lot of these problems. Anyway, I'll leave it there. I can't tell you why people are dying suddenly. It could be the media is reporting on it because they need ad revenue. It could be that simple. It could be that with the faltering economy, and look, CNN's laying people off, BuzzFeed's laying people off. It could be as simple as they're desperate for stories. It could be COVID. Some people say, how could it be COVID? Why wouldn't they just come out and say it was COVID? It's possible that COVID is worse than people realized. It was one of the worst illnesses I've ever experienced. But it's also possible people like Bill Gates don't want to lose too much money. Maybe Bill Gates is like, it's good that things are being locked down and the planet's healing, but it's bad that if we continue this for another 6 months, then I'll really be broke. You think rich people wanted to lose all their money too? No. They only wanted to lose a certain amount. After the fact, they don't care if you die. That's why I've always been like middle of the road as it pertains to all the COVID stuff. Certainly, there are studies coming out that are interesting about vaccines, and the more they do, the more I will say, here are the studies. I tweeted about them. But in the meantime, feel free to speculate and come to conclusions of your own knowledge. Tell me that I'm wrong in the comments below. I have no problem with that. I'm just, I don't know, middle of the road. People say milquetoast fence sitter. Yes, I embrace that because it's funny and sometimes true. But what I actually am pertaining to issues like this is I want to be right and I don't want to lead people astray. You want that? Go to the mainstream media. They'll tell you whatever you want to hear about the far right without evidence. I'm not going to do that. But when it comes to free speech and things like that, I'll call it out. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up at 4 p.m. over at youtube.com/Timcast. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you all then.